about in last summer, and I was introduced through somebody in the Philippines. That is quite some world trip we took. And then I was already quite amazed by what John was telling me about his assessment tool and about his sort of lifelong dedication to culture and organizational development. And so I have written a couple of things down because I didn't want to miss anything. So I think what John is dedicated to is to helping organizations to make sense of where they are in their development and discover the development path that is right for them. So there is something in the word right I really like, that it is not the person who is doing the intervention deciding what is right for them, but actually really assessing the organizations and then taking it from there. So with all this attention for Laloux's book, I think there has the interest in your work has increased exponentially, which is on the one hand great, and on the other hand kind of funny, because you have known, of course, the importance of your work for years, but now, hey, Laloux has paved the way for you, and you are here today with us to push us all a little bit further and spark our interest for the underlying theories and show the depth and the complexity of the work that of those people on whose shoulder Laloux is standing. So those people are Christopher Cowan, Professor Claire Graves, and Don Beck. And John will tell us more what they've done and how that looks. So the last thing I'm saying is John Cook has done his PhD in culture and organizational development about 15 years ago, John. And what's
no, it's 2008 I actually completed it. After 9 years.
Yeah, see, so altogether you said when you started about 15 years ago, you were you were looked upon a little bit as a cult, like, the theories were looked upon as a bit cult-like. So that has changed for sure. And so today we want to hear all about the underlying theories, that the wealth of knowledge that there is beneath these color schemes that Laloux uses so generously. So thank you, John, for doing this with us. Thank you, René Herlaar, for tipping us. Let's do this. Always holding us from the back. And you can talk about how you want to do this, questions or not, and how long and all. Yeah. So thank you for being here. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you. Very nice, Philippine. Nice introduction. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions as we go along. I did a little short PowerPoint slide. Now, I don't want you to all run away screaming, thinking this is too difficult or too hard, but I do want you to ask questions as we go along. So I thought I'd give you a little bit about my background. My background is corporate, senior director level in the UK, America, here in New Zealand. We've moved around the globe many times, my wife and I. As she said, at one time she thought she could just whistle and the house would be packed up and we'd go. So I think we've done about 33 house moves in my career, or our career. So it's been interesting. But I got into this in '96 when I first met Dong Beck, and I was doing my master's in the management of change. And it just struck a chord with me that, this is some sort of social DNA. And that's where my interest started. Now, my colleague, who some of you already know, Christopher Cook in the UK, we've been working together since, I first met him in '96 because he brought Beck over to the UK. But we've been working together since about '98, '99. So we've got a long history in this. And we've worked probably with several hundred companies, whether they're NGOs, hospitals, police forces, private companies, etc., over that time. So we have a wide range of practical skills on implementing it. And currently, I'm working in the Philippines. Not that I go there because I can do everything remotely these days, with a company that is on the Teal journey, and it's a big supermarket chain. So there's a lot of interest that's been coming up on that. So that's a little bit about my background. The other thing is my model is twofold. I support other coaches and consultants globally. So I do research for them. I may set up interventions, discussions, etc. And we use the tools that we've developed. And we've got a new set of tools that are coming out next month, that are specifically aimed at the Teal people wanting to make that journey. And believe it or not, it'll be launched in South America in April, because there's a lot of interest there. But I'll come on to that because they're not really in that space yet. So it's a question of how you lead people into that space. So let me share my screen. I don't want to bore you to death with
one question, John. You're taking questions during your presentation, and
yes.
also after. We have reserved some time after.
Yep.
And if people are wanting to ask questions through the chat, that is also possible. I will look at them.
Yeah, yeah. And if I'm covering it later on, I'll say so, and you know, we can take a note of it and answer it later in the question time.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. I need to share screen, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
Which you've got to do first. I've got too many screens open. Here we go. Share screen. There we go. That should be the one. Yes, that's the one. Okay.
Yes, beautiful. We can see it.
Okay, right. Oh, I found out how to Zoom. Now, I work under the banner of intentional integral practice. So overall, besides Graves's work and Ken Wilber, we include U theory, we include Keegan, and many, many other tools, which are the interventions. But the actual tools from Graves are probably the most important, because they give you clues on what interventions you need to use within an organization. So I've called this early detection, because one thing you may not be aware of is that the Gravesian framework gives you a tool to predict where a person or organization is going to go next. So it has a predictive capability. And I'm calling it developing individual organizations' resiliency to manage emergence to wholeness by understanding human, social, cultural behavior. Bit of a mouthful, but I thought it looked good. So one of the questions, I think it was Sue asked, and I've been wrestling with this for quite a few days, is what use is this approach? So for the client, or the people you're working with, or yourself, understanding starts with the self. So we can have a deeper understanding of self, and that's where change starts. We also look at the deeper understanding of the human dynamics of the organization. It gives us the ability to access the diversity of those organizations, and we increase innovation, and we end up with a more vibrant and engaged and successful organization. At the moment on my blog site, I'm asking our customers to put up stories about their experience. So I think there's 3 up at the moment, but one's in Spanish. For the coach, we offer a suite of tools and techniques that help the individual or organization's journey. And the last bit is we enable better levels of communications and understanding. Now, to save you having to take notes of that, you can have copies of all the slides and a copy of this communication gap model. Now, I'm only going to read from it at the moment to just give you a little sight, but not show it to you, otherwise you'll get distracted. But this was a real live company in the UK, a contractor working for a bigger company. And there was a guy called Bob and his manager Jane, and they were traditional base building contractors. Now, Bob had a set of values, coping mechanisms, which were based on tribal and social network, and secondary as people driven. He was also an incrementalist in first order change. Jane, on the other hand, was success driven with some tribal and strong individualism, and second order change, which is revolutionary. So you can already see that there's tension between the two of them. And what we can do in gap analysis like this is we can work out what Bob needs from manager Jane. So we can say what his communications are preferred. So he needed non-verbal communications rather than written. He needs communications to come from consensus. He needs a sense of belonging, and he needs to build trust. We also look at motivation buttons. So he had respect for power, tradition, all those good things. And we look at his traditional learning styles. His was traditional teacher relationship. So then we can do the same for Jane, her communication style. And at the end of this paper, which you can have, we can work out what the tensions were. And to give you an idea was that Bob was offered promotion. He was working for a family company, so it was a little tribal, but he himself was tribal. And the manager, though, was really success driven. So we now look at what were the tensions between the two. So there was the change, and this is a big one in organizations, between incremental and step change. So he was an incrementalist, Jane was a step change merchant. So you've got immediate tensions in there. Now, I'm not going to go into that any further. You can read it, but I just want to give you an idea that the learning styles, management styles, and communication styles, you can work out what the tensions are and how people like to communicate. This is extremely important in team building. Okay? No questions so far. Now, the second task I set myself, because I've been working with Graves's work for close on 20 years now, I really do want to bring it into the 21st century. Professor Graves himself started his research in the 1950s, and he wrote a draft book in 97, but he died unfortunately in 86. And his draft book was published by Cowan and Natasha, Chris Cowan and Natasha, in 2005, which covers a lot of what he had in his draft book. But I don't know if any of you have read the book Spiral Dynamics, but I find it as a very difficult book to read and sometimes understand. So, you know, some of the language is very psychologically based, etc., etc. So I've tried to make it simpler. So what do we have? What is the base of social and cultural behaviors? There are two areas. One, there's our mind capacity that we switch on to handle complexity. That's on the right, the sort of beigey color bit of the spiral. I don't know whether you can see my pointer. Here we are, that bit there. And on the left, this greeny bluey bit, we have life conditions. Right, so there's always a dance between the capacity we switched on and our life conditions. And on the way, there are what we call complex human adaptive systems. These are the filters. Now, have any of you ever done the exercise on filters? Just wave if you have. Now, nobody's asked you to hold your hand behind your head like that and pretend it's a big mirror and look around the room at various objects. and people. And what happens is that information comes into you, it's reflected off the mirror, and then you make a decision on how you're going to react to it. Now, this was first mooted by Francis Bacon in the 15th century, from memory. It's called the mirror in the mind. Now, each person grows up and is educated and has hardships and all the other good things that life conditions, and it alters their mirror. A good example was, remember they wanted to throw out the Hubble telescope because its mirror was distorted, and they found some software to make it work again. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. That is our mirror in the mind. So we reflect things through these filters, and these filters are called coping mechanisms. Now, Graves called them coping systems, which is just as good. Beck calls them V-memes. And unfortunately, he was at the beginning of the V-memetic area, so I don't use that. I found working in South Africa with people there and other countries, coping mechanism is much more recognized by managers. So what do we have? We have that joins them, this little green thing. It joins the life conditions and it joins our capacities for thinking. And within there are our conditions for change. So are we very comfortable with the day? Are we frustrated? Do we feel something wants to change? If we're in sync with those, then that's fine. We may be here in a green-centric, humanistic, people-driven environment, and that's where we want to be. We're completely in tune with those conditions. If we become too content with the day, then we become complacent and things won't change. So that's just very quick overview. I'm sure you'll have hundreds of questions. So the other thing I was going to just touch on very quickly is what is in a color. And I think it's important to understand the terminology. Remember, we've got from the 1950s to now, so that's a lot of water under the bridge and a lot of experience. Professor Claire Graves saw his framework as a map. It tells you where you are, but it doesn't tell you where you need to go. It points to saying that we can switch on that and go that way, or you can regress and switch on that. Now, Wilber and Lalou, because he's following Ken Wilber's philosophy, that it's a human development system. And from my reading, Graves never saw it that way. He would say no one way is better than another. And what right do we have as another human to say that is wrong for that person? We may say, in our view, with our filters, it's wrong to be a warlord, but the people living under a warlord have a different set of values to look at it, and you can't sort of move them out of it. So Frederick Laloux uses the term teal and amber, which adds confusion. Beck and Cowan used the colours to signify the coping mechanisms. And now it's important their colours just weren't random. The warm colours were I-centred and the cool colours were we-centred. And in life, we always go from an I to a we, to an I, to a we. Or we go from a we to an I and backwards. So we can go more complex or less complex depending on what happens in our life conditions. We can alter our life conditions and other things altered. Okay?
Sorry, John, to interrupt. Like in life, like in everybody's life, or in history, you know, in human...
No, well, it's in both. But in everybody's life, you go through these things. I mean, the first one that any of you that are parents will know is the terrible twos. The terrible twos is red.
Okay.
Right? Then you get the teenage red.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where they have limited capacity to look around you, you know, as you well know with teenage drivers. And here in New Zealand, students going to get their driving license at 15. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the neurology there, they don't have proper peripheral vision. So they filter out things that are happening at the side. So all these things are going on. So I stick to the yellow and blue purely because you lose the I and we centered factors within those coping mechanisms. The other thing I've noticed, and Philippine brought this up last night when we were going through this, is that Lalou doesn't really look at purple.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
My understanding, I didn't get this from Chris, I got it from somebody else in the States, that teal and yellow don't really equate for some reason, because Ken Wilber's work takes only one aspect of yellow. Is that correct?
It depends which books you read. In some of the books, like A Theory of Everything, he takes everything in yellow. In some of his Integral Spirituality, then he only takes little bits of yellow. So it's very hard to say equates, but for our purposes, let's assume that they roughly equate. You know, we can have a look at that and go into it deeper, but I think it'll be outside the scope of today. I'm trying to keep it a little simple tonight. But the big thing, as I said, Lalou doesn't really talk about purple, tribal. Now, this is so important in companies. In the 90s, it was completely wiped out for costs, but it is the basis of all teamwork. I mean, for example, the All Blacks, the Springboks, any of the big rugby teams wouldn't exist without very strong purple.
John, can you give me a little bit more sense of what purple is?
Purple is tribal. It's
so before the Lalou's red, right?
Yes, before Lalou's red, correct. It's a we system, and it was one of the first we systems which appeared about 40,000 years ago, when wandering bands needed to become bigger for safety. So that's where it came from. But what I'll do is, as we go into the unhealthy and healthy side, you'll see how these things fit in, because you want healthy purple. And in South Africa, with some of the work I've supported in the diamond mines, you can see the unhealthy purple, you know, employing a relative because they're a relative, not because they do the job, and all those sorts of things going on there. And then there's the magic, mystery, and traditions that go with it. This is extremely important with children. For instance, if you have a child that won't go to sleep at night, then you can do things like plug in a angel nightlight and say it's there to protect them. So you're giving them the safety and magic to encompass them. But it is underrated in businesses. And I see more and more businesses coming back and bringing in a good, healthy element of purple, because otherwise their teamwork doesn't work. Now, I use the code letters. I use Graves' code letters, and the reason I use them with the color is because it maintains the relationship between life conditions and the capacities that we have switched on. Okay, if I'm losing any of you, shout, and I'll try and simplify. So as part of my push ahead, we started back in 2004, starting to use different names for the values, for the coping mechanisms or value systems, if you want to call that. And the reason was I found a lot of people were turned off by the psychological speak in the books. I mean, it's very deep from a psychological point of view. So what we've got at the bottom here, and for some unknown reason, I can't get my little laser pointer to work, or perhaps I can. Just give me a second. Here we go, laser pointer. There we go. We start here at survival, which we can't measure. This is a time when we probably had 18 odd senses, of which we've now lost down to 5 or 6. As things got bigger, groups need to get bigger. We went to the bond, which is the tribal situation, the purple. People became frustrated with that. Chemical changes in the brain. That involved individualism, and that is an I expressive side. That was the time of the kings, the warlords, and you're still seeing it around now. This expressive mean is very cunning and creative. It controls the tribe, and it also controls the next level up in manage. But I can give you stories about that later on. So as we had an eye, the warlords, all the rest of it caused problems. They had no guilt. There's still people around with no guilt now. We've seen that in the bombers in Brussels in the last 24 hours. So religion started on the planet. That started the manage process, bringing guilt in, rewards later. So we've gone to another we. Then things happened in the world, the plague, lots of people died off, and we evolved into strategize, which is the success-driven. Now, all the things that were invented in the manage area, which are scientific discoveries, were exploited by the strategize. And their view on the unhealthy side was we can take everything from the earth and it doesn't affect anything. The answer to that was that we harmonized the green movement. We said, hey, hang on a bit. People aren't just fodder to industry. They are real beings. They have a real role to play within communities, organizations, and companies. Now, that went to extreme. Political correctness and things like that, probably at the top extreme of that. And the problem there is that they can stop the development of all the other value systems. I'll come on to that a bit more in a while. So what was the answer to that? There was a big gap in thinking, and we went to a line, which is the complexity. These are the first level of beings. They're people that are their own being. And if you ever work for an organization with it and they're unhealthy, I would leave fairly quickly because you'd be completely confused and frustrated. As a healthy side, their role is to make sure all the other value systems are healthy. Now, the big emerging one is intuitive. This is global. Now, what happened was I said down here that you had 18 odd senses in those days, forward thought, all sorts of things to conserve energy when hunting. But as we became more socialized, we needed more of the brain capacity for that socialization. So what happened is that the survival mean, and that's what these little things here mean, there and there, started to be reworked to give us more capacity for complexity. Example, if you want to go into that, is autistic. There are some people that are autistic that have absolutely fantastic gifts. There's a guy that flew over Rome and could reproduce every building just at one look that he saw. But as he became more socialized, his skill dropped down because he was having to use more of his brain functions for socialization. So purple is now evolving into a global tribal situation. So we are seeing the role of global tribes something, and we're beginning to see people taking this on board. It's been available for about the last 30 years, but people are taking notice of it. Okay, so questions? I'm going quickly. Yeah. I can think of.
Just one step back, John. Could you quickly refer them to the Lalou colors now? Because
okay, with the two colors.
Because I have a sense, yeah.
Right, yellow is teal. Mm-hmm. And blue is amber. Okay, so you can see how you would lose the cool colors being a we collective and the warm colors being an I expressive. Okay, so manage is amber, mm-hmm. and align is teal.
And strategize orange is orange?
Orange is orange, red is red. And
green is green, yes.
Green is green, purple is purple. He doesn't go to turquoise.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think he should, because turquoise is going to have the answer to all these independent, complex thinking beings that are their own person. So they all come up with solutions, the same thing, different solutions to solve the same problem. Somebody has to say, hey guys, bash heads together, which is the one that we're actually going to use. And that's got to come from here, a we collective. So the we collective will be bringing all these people together. Okay, does that answer the question?
Yes, a little bit, because my sense is that also teal is between your yellow and turquoise. Is that possible? Because there's a lot of talk about collective and
Yes, but it is a different collective, right? One of the problems that we face is that the harmonized people-driven from green, what's the word? They project their filters and value systems onto the intuitive system. So they think it's just a bigger version of green. It isn't. It isn't. I mean, these people coming out of here would be ruthless. They would, let's say that if there was a plague threatening an area, spreading and wiping out humanity, they would be the first people to nuke it. There wouldn't be any discussions on it. They would do it because they're prepared to give up their life and the life of others to save the planet. So it's really teal is not between the two.
Okay.
If anywhere, teal is between green and yellow.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Right. Okay, so these are the coping mechanisms. Common is obviously all the basics. You don't see this very often. My colleague who counsels abused children in South Africa has come across it on children that wander between dumpsters just to find food. They have no sense of place. They just wander aimlessly. And one of the things he does, he puts them in a safe place and he preserves the sacred events and memories. He puts them into a purple environment. Because one of the things I will keep saying, you can only lead from half a place ahead of where a person is. So express enjoys herself to the fullest without guilt or remorse.
Stop here, John. This is very, very, very important information for coaches and consultants and facilitators.
Yep.
You can only lead people from half a step ahead. So
correct.
I think this is the basis of why you're here, that you show us, A, that there is all these levels, many more levels than we think,
Yep.
and B, that you cannot go faster. You cannot jump levels.
You can't jump them, but you can go through them very quickly.
Yes. So what is quick for you? How do you do that?
Well, it really depends on there's lots of other things that we look at, like open, arrested, and closed. So whether they're open to change, they're arrested and need a prodding, or they're totally closed, in which case you're better to walk away because you're not going to get them to open up and move. The express red, on its healthy side, you need it. It's creativity. It is, they will always find solutions. They're great artists. And they are the fireman that runs into the burning building to save people in its healthy form. In its unhealthy form, they are cunning and manipulative. And they will manipulate the tribe. So they'll use the bond of the tribe as a big family and manipulate it to their own ends. We've seen this in some of the trusts that are set up for the tribes. The people that become trustees have got a lot of hidden red, and they find a few years later that they've run off with the money from the trust. So you have to really watch this red, and I can't emphasize it. Healthy is good, unhealthy isn't. Now manage. These are all the processes that we have in place. It was controlled from guilt. It's actually the time 5,000 years ago all religion started. So all processes, all scientific discoveries, the one correct way to do things is in this. So the rules of the road, the processes you put in for KPIs and things in your organizations are all within this system. But Express can manipulate it. The classic one is the professor. I've got tenure, you can't get me. The Enrons, well, we ticked all the boxes and did everything it said in the rule book, but we still squirreled away or took away millions of pounds. And you see this in the banks There was a case in the ANZ Bank of the dealers still into the drugs rock and roll culture. And they were getting around the rules. So this has to be watched. Strategize. This was the success-driven, deserve success, self-reliance, risk-taking. If we didn't have strategize, we wouldn't be talking to you now on the internet. We wouldn't be talking to you on telephones. I mean, I don't know how. Can you remember in England the first Trill phones? Before that, all you had was a Bakelite phone in 2 colors. And it's exploitation of technology by Strategize that has got us to where we are. But it's also got us in the mess we're in. So that's when Harmonize came up. People, consensus, reconciliation, all that good stuff. We're into another we. But again, they can be manipulated by red, because red is very charismatic and can manipulate green, and it can also be manipulated by Strategize. So you have to be aware of these things as a coach and how you put things together. I mean, the classic is when people were protesting about not going to the war in Vietnam or joining up in America, which was coming out of green, it was the Strategized people that were around the back selling the T-shirts. Some of you may have heard these stories before. Then we have a big gap in thinking, and a line have the capacity equal to all the other value systems, coping mechanisms below by a factor of 10. So if you put them in a room together, they can come up with 10 times more solutions than all the others put together. But there's healthy and unhealthy side of that. And now we're seeing the evolving, the cosmic planet society. We're actually seeing the next one above that, which is coral, starting to evolve, which will be another I system. So Graves came up with...
Sorry, John, you went too fast. You went too fast. The top,
sorry,
where is the coral?
It's not on here yet.
Ah, okay.
Coral will be there where my little laser pointer is.
Okay, yes,
right?
I get it. Yes.
Right, and Graves said that the brain has the capacity for 18 sets of 6.
18 sets of?
6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the first set below the blue line, the slot here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can have another 6 above that and another 6 above that again. Right?
So we're really in very early stages of evolutionary conscious development. Right,
and as we go out to the stars, or if we ever get into space, then more of these things will start to come on. So it is
my goodness. I will go on mute. Then mute me.
Well, would you like me to confuse you a bit more? Each one of these has three conditions.
Yes.
It has an entering phase, it has a prime or nodal phase, which is the top of it, and it has an exiting phase. Now, all that is covered in Spiral Dynamics book, but very few people talk about it. So I won't talk about it today. I don't want to confuse you too much. So why? We use this to understand and uncover the hidden filters we use to survive in our life conditions. A filter is a coping mechanism, which, as I said, the mirror in the mind, it's how we reflect things back, our life conditions. In life, we move from an I to a we, more complex systems, or we move from a we to less complex I systems. So if there is a sudden threat, let's say a famine or warlord comes and takes over Vongere, then we will regress back down the spiral to a less complex system. We still have the other stuff available, but for us to survive, we might have to go into red. So you can flow both ways. Again, we do see this. We see this out there in the real world. Now, no one better way than the other. It's what's right for you or the organization. And as a coach, once we've mapped where that is, then you can start putting the interventions in. So if you've got a highly red boss or a highly strategic boss, running that organization, you can then start putting in the interventions about ego control, communications, perhaps using subject object Keegan stuff to coach them into the next coping mechanism. Lead staff is half a step ahead. I cannot emphasize that too much. Now, the other thing that Lalu doesn't cover is the levels of change. So what we do is we identify the comfort and frustration levels within their life conditions. So if we're working in an organization, we look for the people that have high frustration level and are a teal or yellow thinking capacity. By finding that, you can find the blockages in the barriers to change. And I know in one UK company, we found the frustration point and the thinker. At home, he was highly creative. He was a yellow thinker. At work, he wouldn't bring his head above the parapet because it gets shot off. Put him in charge of the problem. He solved it, and they found 5 million in assets that hadn't been capitalized, purely because we've broken the barriers to change. So there's things like this. I'll just put these little nuggets in as we go along. There are healthy, unhealthy aspects to each set of filters. And the role of the more complex system, if healthy, and I stress if healthy, is to steer the less complex systems towards being healthy. So the work we're doing in the Philippines at the moment, we're working to steer, which is, it's really blue, red, blue, orange in those terms type working environment. But there are one or two yellow people in there that can start to make sure that it's healthy success. It's healthy systems and not systems in there that become bureaucratic. It's healthy red, allowing creativity. Okay, so that's the why. Now, I don't want you to read this. It'll be in the pack. You can read it yourself. But what I wanted to highlight here is this. If you're in a Teal GT organization and they are unhealthy because of their own person, they become impatient and detail and redundancy. They can appear cold and ruthless because they can be impatient and abrupt. They can just lose interest and walk away, because firing them is just another opportunity for them. It doesn't scare them because they're their own being without fear. They get analysis paralysis. Sometimes they want too much information and go around in circles. The other thing that they can do is upset their followers because each day they come in with a different solution if they're a manager. And I've counseled managers through that who are coming from the teal yellow. So I'm just giving you some thinking there. Now, somebody, I can't remember who asked about red. Now, you can only control red from blue. So let's take an example, family violence, which is quite a good one. And there's some good initiatives running here where there's physical abuse going on, the children aren't going to school on time, they're not getting their school lunches, they're not getting fed properly. What do you do to bring that red under control? Well, what they do is they send in blue people that put in a set of rules with instant rewards. So it might be as simple as the carer or the people going in and saying, right, I'll be here at 8 o'clock in the morning and we will make a toast and breakfast and we will do the children's lunches. It might be as simple as that as rules. And it might be as simple as saying, you know, we don't take these out in violence, we will now counsel you on how to overcome it. But it's from the DQ point of view. You are not going to do it from green. You're just not going to do it. It just doesn't have the resource to do it. You're seeing this in Sweden. Sweden was extremely green, and it's now discovered that they went so far green that their society is falling apart. instead of having the best hospital system in the world, which they used to have, it is literally falling apart because they believed everybody was equal and everybody had the same say. They're now having to rethink their society because it's gone too far. And it's the same in companies. I've taught in green institutions and I cannot take it for more than 10 days. It is so restricting, forcing no emotions. You're not allowed to show emotions and all those sort of things going on. Okay, so you can read this at your own.
Yeah. And yesterday, John, you had another example with tribal red men in Africa. If you want to,
right.
If you want them, go on to use condoms.
Right. Yes, yeah, that's right. So if you want to stop the spread of AIDS there, you have to appeal to the power, mana of the red-scented person. So it would be, be a man, use a condom. Mm. It's the same when you're teaching them, and Mandela understood this because Beck did a lot of work in South Africa during the transition. And if you wanted to teach a red tribal person how to dig a hole, you pick up a spade, you go out in the field and you dig a hole. When I think it was Mbeki came in, he put it out to tender, and a Swedish company came in using green methods. Sit around a table and we discuss the theory of digging a hole. Okay, tongue in cheek. It didn't work. So, those are little stories. I got loads of these over
yes,
the years.
Meet people where they are. That is, for me,
You've got to meet people where you are. Mm. Now, I thought I'd put this in because this is Graves' original drawing from 1977, which I've overlaid. And you can see I've actually put it in there, yellow and turquoise. Where's my little pointer gone? There. Right, yellow, turquoise. And he's used the codes of AN- and BO- to show that it's a reworking of these down here. Now, each one of these goes into a cycle. So second and third world life conditions are exiting blue, starting to exit red, and just starting to exit tribal, purple. Whereas in the first world, we're now seeing a movement to exit the success-driven, exit the excesses of the green people-driven, and enter the align complex thinking. So you can see how they come up in waves. So there's 6 in the first wave, and there'll be 6 in the second wave, and so on. And of course, these are nice little curves, but as you can see from the pull-out he did, it's actually a bit jagged. Mm. Okay.
I just want to add that this was done in 1977. So
correct.
It had some sort of, how do you call it?
Prediction?
Prediction, exactly. Prediction qualities in there, that he could tell that in, what is this, 50 years, that those sort of developmental stages would come to an end, and that the yellow and the turquoise would start exactly here. Years ago, 60, 30. So, and I think it's also nice to point out to this audience that this is, I think, where our 2 loops model comes in. Where you see the exiting of one old system, actually 2 old systems, and new entering here, which Graves basically predicted here. So it's
correct.
A complicated chart, but I just loved it for the how you see those loops coming to an end and new ones emerging.
The other thing you ought to see there along the bottom, which you'll see that A is 100,000 years ago, and yellow is 60 years ago, and B, turquoise, is 30 years ago. That's when they started appearing.
Mm-hmm. John, is there, so obviously as we evolve, those transitions are becoming closer and closer, shorter in years.
Correct.
Data on the percentage of the population that's in green, orange, yellow?
I can give you it on yellow because that's one I've been tracking. When I first started this in 1996, and it's certainly in Wilbur's book, yellow and turquoise were less than 2% of the total population. With my research now, I found that yellow has reached over 15%. So we are reaching a tipping point as yellow systemic thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
We are reaching that tipping point. And I think if I dug out the figures on turquoise, we'd probably find that that is starting to rise as well. And I think that's very, very important. Now, I don't bother about this first and second tier because, you know, he says it was a giant leap for mankind when we went to this higher complexity thinking. But I know Cowan didn't necessarily agree with that. So I just keep it as a linear progression. Oh, the other thing you might be interested in is I talked about the warm colours and the cool colours. And I've got some more diagrams of Graves where he did autopsies on brains. And all the cool colours are on the left-hand side of the brain and all the warm colours are on the right-hand side of the brain. And this has been borne out by some limited studies in Germany using scanners and Graves's original word sets. So it's just another interesting thing. It ties up to left and right brain as well. Okay, coping mechanism.
Could you just repeat, the warm colours are on which side of the brain?
The warm are on the right, and the cool are on the left.
Okay.
Though being dyslexic, I might well have reversed it, but I don't think I did.
Well, that's fine. I'm dyslexic too. So.
I do tend to do that. Yeah, when my wife's driving, and she wants instructions, I tell her to turn left, and then I say, "Why are you turning left?" I meant right. But that's probably a male thing. Right, coping mechanisms. And why do I use coping mechanisms? Why don't I use V-memes or value memes that Spiral Dynamics? And it's purely because there's a lot of weight in the word values. People tend to think they know what they mean, values and behaviors, whereas what we're talking about is something much more complex. So coping mechanisms are a set of values and behaviors which allow an individual to survive in a given set of life conditions. Right, so this is what gives rise to culture, these coping mechanisms. And we've looked, these are the coping mechanisms here. These are the ones we know about, the 8 there. And within a person, different coping mechanisms are different at home, work, and community. And you can play nice little gap models on that. And it was the first time I've actually been able to track when a person leaves their brain at the gate because of the culture within the company. You can actually see it because in one of the assessments we break out those 3 mechanisms. But as a coach or a consultant, nice things to know. Now, as I said, Graves had 8 different types of coping mechanisms, potential of 18. That's a total capacity of 18. I've never worked out how he did it, how he did that calculation. And I've dug into all sorts of stuff and never worked it out, but it sounds all right. Right, now this one I'm putting in, some of you may have seen it many times. Now what I'm saying is that we are made up of all these. They're all within us. But the express doesn't have anything above blue. As you can see that blue is just emerging there. I'm pointing at the screen here. It's just emerging. So let's say this is Attila the Hun. He's ill, which is his purple here. So it's near the surface because he wants to go to home to mum to get his chicken soup. This is one of Chris's stories, which he'll tell you. But also, he does have some restrictions on what he does. He has to pray to his gods at a certain time, etc., etc. But his capacity is restricted. Quick story there. Salesman that we knew, very high red, very high success driven, got made redundant and would go out of the house every day to go to work because he couldn't afford to lose face with his family. That put him into a spiral of frustration, which ended up in family violence, etc., etc., etc. because he did not have switched on the complexity of thinking to think his way out of it. Right? Then the next one here, this is a green-centered person. Now, often a green-centered person, when they go on the squash court, out comes the red, I'm going to win, and so on. So you can see here it's a much more balanced, and there's more complexity of thinking in there, as long as it's healthy. Now, what I did today, Philippine, I did another one for you, which is the Teal Align.
Oh my goodness.
This has not been done before, so you're a first here to see it. Now, these people believe on competency supersedes rank, power, and status, their own person. Now, in the healthy form, they have the ability to talk the language of all the other systems. So to survive in their life conditions, they can choose which ones are best. So in this model here, he's chosen for his family that purple, green with some yellow is the way he wants to work with his family. But he's still got red and some orange going in sports position. At work, he's using his success-driven, because he's in a success-driven company, with a little bit of people awareness in his work position. In social, he's using his people-driven green value system. In religion, he might be following practices, whether it's yoga, meditation, all those things, which are coming from a blue base. His politics may be blue. So he's making choices of how he puts his stack together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm wondering, John, because you did an assessment of me. So maybe this is information that is interesting at this stage, that you can do an assessment as a person and as a system. So I did one as a person, and I'm just wondering, did this be a picture of me?
Could well be.
I'm sitting thinking,
I'm being cautious there without bringing up your results and having a quick look. But yes, if you're align-centered, which if I remember rightly you are, then you may be making different choices and slightly tilting this to fit your own. For instance, you might find it's better to be more tribal in the social vein than green.
So I think this is very interesting to give a quality to, in our Lalou thinking, it is so segmented, you're red or orange or green or this. And here you get a picture, a visual picture of how we have layers, how we have different colors inside all of us, and that they come out in different parts. So I think this is very clarifying. Thank you.
Right.
John, can I just pick up on something that you have said? Are all the organizations in Frederick Lalou's book really Teal organizations, or are they? I've heard some people say they're not necessarily really Teal.
Yeah, that's true. They're not necessarily really Teal. It depends on which one you're doing. The nurses tend to be green, exiting green. Yeah. So, right, and the manufacturing ones seem to be orange, exiting orange into green. And my opinion is Lalou has done a brilliant job of bringing awareness into there, but he is also struggling with the transition from green to teal or yellow. It's a big leap. It's a factor of 10, if you like. So going through that transition is extremely traumatic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so, one other thing, we've been looking at the movie Augenhöhe with a few people of this community. I don't know if you've heard of it, John.
Is that the one where they're talking about their organizations?
Yes, in Germany. It is.
Yes, I've seen that. Yep.
And somebody said this has nothing to do with teal. This is just orange going into green.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or if you wanted to be really cynical, it's orange with a green whitewash.
Yeah.
Or green wash. Sorry, not a green.
especially the Unilever one. I've been inside and this is a little bit of whitewashing, teal washing.
Teal
Anyway,
washing.
yes,
yeah, it's useful. So you can see that it is complex. Now, what I'm going to do now is talk about how we measure things. And I think here I can zoom in. This is one of the dashboards that we use. Zoom, here we are. Zoom, right. This is one of the dashboards that we use. So in here at the top, we're looking at the bottom lines. So that's their perception of the organization. And I'm doing this in an organizational view, but it also takes their own view of themselves. So
sorry, John, maybe good to clarify that this would be the sort of cover page of an assessment you would have been doing of somebody.
Correct.
This is what I received, and I can tell you it's rather overwhelming if you receive something like this, and you need somebody to take you through. So what you call the dashboard, this is the overview. So there is a report going into the details. Correct. And then there is a 19-page coaching report that we've done with our people in South America, which they use for coaching, which has lots of other detail and explanation and all that sort of stuff in there. But all I'm showing you is what we cover. That's all I want you to get an idea. So we're looking at the job fit, whether it's aligned or not. We're looking at supervisor fit, the work group fit, and the work fit. And then we look at the coping mechanisms. Oh, I could use, I'm pointing at the screen and you can't see me doing that. These are the coping mechanisms here. So you can see this one is well up in turquoise. And the others are slightly down. But I won't go into the analysis of that because that would take a little bit of time. And what they're saying is their present organization, they consider it turquoise and they want it as desired turquoise. Now, this is a full set of figures. Most people would say they've got an orange organization and they want a yellow organization. This is your left-right brain thinking, whether you're analog or digital. So I'm a 0, I'm totally analog. So I can be a dreamer and all those sort of things. At the other end of the scale is 15 is an analog thinker. They're the precise people that dot the I's and cross the T's. If you do it in a group of people, this test, and get them to line up in a line, you can near enough say that the people on the right of the line with scores of 15 are accountants or engineers. So you can do it that way. So then we look at first order and second order. First order is incremental and second order is revolutionary. We then look at contentment with today, something's wrong, frustration level, energy to change, and something new. And we look at introversion, extroversion. I added this 18 months ago. Particularly in the Philippines, they were having trouble with their teams, not understanding why certain people weren't participating. Since they've understood that there was a very high introversion rate within that team, they've put interventions in place to help those people come forward with the ideas. And remember, if you don't involve the introverts, you're losing something like 40% of the diversity in your organization. So those are the things that we measure. Executive style preferences, that's entrepreneurial transformation and translation I didn't cover. And we also measure chaos and order. So those are some of the things that we bring together when we're looking at an integral point of view. Now, I want to just spend a little bit of time on change. I call these catalyst memes, but they're the joining bridge between life conditions and the coping mechanism. So instead of using alpha, beta, gamma, delta, I've tried to put this into English. So today is how stable you are in your life conditions. A high score means that you're probably going towards complacency. A low score means you're unhappy. Sensing, you must have all have it. You have something worrying you at the back of your mind and you think, something has changed in my environment. Do I need to change with it?
And you may not quite know what it is, but it's something at the back of your brain. So we measure that. Feeling, this is the feeling of frustration. And we can get frustration scores where you really have to advise the client that this is really a psychologist or psychiatrist's area, because the scores are so high. And particularly if they're coming from a green centre with high, very, very high, and I mean very high, frustration level, because green was the first level really where we internalized things and suicide became an option. So feeling frustration is very important. We look at it when we're about 2 points above the average to look at what's going on. Energy is, this is the energy to make that breakthrough, to break through the barriers and make change happen. And then we have new thinking, and this is about the ideas that produce a new future about what change will look like. Now, these are connected back to your coping mechanisms. So how you handle them depends where your center of gravity is in your coping mechanisms. And we say, look at the top 3 scores, because that gives you clues. And then first and second order change. This is important if you're counseling a CEO as second order, and he's got, say, problems in a finance department, which are all incrementalists and first order. In other words, all these ideas have to be chunked down into little bits of information to follow a process. So there's interactions going on all the way. Now, I put this into a little chart just to show you what the common things are. So the first one is imbalance. The U is equal heights on either side. The one below it is out of balance because today they're not happy with, but they have lots of new thinking. Now, if a person has lots of new thinking and a high score there, not content with today, and if they don't address that new thinking, then they go into a spiral which increases their frustration level, particularly if they're coming out of the less complex thinking systems. So you can see the second one here is out of balance because today they're sensing something, it needs to change, they're feeling frustration, they have a little bit of energy to change, but they've got no new thinking. So in companies, the company has not laid out the direction of the company. Where are they going? What is the pull to the future? Where are they going? This then goes into a spiral of frustration levels. Okay, you can read this for yourself. I'm just giving you some ideas. It was a little chart I knocked up for a paper last year, which people seem to quite like. Now, barriers to change. I'm only going to talk about these very quickly. I have a lot more on questions to ask and things, but this is something that Graves certainly came up with. You have to have a potential for new complex thinking. So, as you say, lead half a step ahead. Red is not going to have enough complex thinking, potential for more complex thinking. It gets trapped into a certain level of change. You have to find the solutions for day-to-day problems. So if food and water isn't on the table, they have to be solved first. You need dissonance. There has to be something going on that is causing friction between the current ways of coping and the new problems that are emerging. And that's what we're seeing with the Teal movement. People are saying, hey, we've been using these old methods. It's causing friction, but we don't really know what the new methods look like yet. So there's dissonance going on there. You have to deal with the barriers and you have to identify each one, whether it's a pay claim, whether it's training, whether it's learning, whether it's self-development. You have to identify them and deal with them because nothing will happen until they deal. Then you have to have the insights into alternatives and viable options. Now that takes 20% of your effort. The big percentage is the support and conversation, is the support available during the transition and consolidation. That takes 80% of the time. So you can see we've got
very important for us coaches, consultants, the insight into alternatives. That is just,
Yeah,
but the support during the transition. We can come up
yeah.
with a great idea and push them in the right direction, but yeah.
And the big problem is that Orange-based companies don't want to spend the money on keeping their consultant there to support them.
Exactly.
So that's why a lot of change initiatives actually fail, because the support is not there. You know, how many times have people gone on a course, come back full of energy, and it collapses because there's no support to implement what they've learned.
Exactly.
So
can I ask a question about that? So
yeah.
if the consultant is in an orange field trying to help an orange company change, how does that pan out?
Well, the first thing you have to recognize is, first of all, you have to find out whether it's healthy or unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming it's healthy, then they will have taken on the best consultant they can afford, and they will have faith in that consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So they're more likely to have a friendship and listen to you and let you do what you think is best, because they've already employed the best.
But no, sorry, I don't know if I've explained myself. If the consultant is in orange as well as the company.
Ah, sorry. If the consultant is orange, then you really have a clash, because the consultant is striving for success in his own business and not necessarily listening to what the company wants.
The reason I ask the question is because, and I'm sure it's like this elsewhere, in Scotland we have the Health Improvement Team, which is part of the government NHS. We have Scottish Enterprise, which has consultants that go out, which is part of the sort of government. And those people tend to be in an organisation that is orange or blue.
Yep.
So they're operating in an orange and blue environment, and then they're going out to either an orange or blue environment. So I was wondering how supportive they could be.
Yeah, I would say that an orange consultant is a mismatch. You really need to find a yellow or exiting green consultant that can talk the language of the company or the organization. So a good teal, yellow, whatever you want to call him, consultant will be able to morph into the orange and say, have you thought of this? That people are not just resources, for a simple example. And perhaps you put this strategy in and just gently lead them. Don Beck, I don't know whether he still does it, he has a thing called the Trojan Horse Award. And in fact, I've got my Trojan horse somewhere. He gave me a little Trojan horse on wheels.
I love that. That's what I use. We call them the champions. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Trojan horse. You bring somebody in an organization looking like a horse, and inside is all of this other stuff.
That's right.
And I think, Fiona, your question about you cannot take people further than one step or half a step ahead at a time, but you do need to have consultants or coaches or trainers who are a little bit ahead. Because if you're in the same...
Because this is what I've been saying to the Scottish Government, that how can an organisation that is in the same sort of world view as the organisation they're helping implement, sorry, let me turn that off. Oh gosh, I can't turn it off, sorry. You can certainly hear, I can hear my phone. So yes, so a lot of the internal government departments who support the government in change are actually from the same worldview.
Yeah.
Questioning the government about that. And they sort of recognise it. And we showed the Oggenhoff film yesterday, and there's quite a few government people there, and the people from the Faroe Working Convention. And they quite liked the film because they could see that they could move to that because it's not that far ahead.
Yeah.
But Peter. Sorry.
Sorry, Fiona. Can we
Yes, I'll turn off the stuff.
No, have John finish his presentation, and then if there is time, you can still ask him some questions.
Okay. Right. So we're really nearly at the end of the I mean, this was a whirlwind tour. My online course roughly takes 3 to 6 months for people to complete. I mean, I've actually had people on it that are still 2 years and they haven't completed it yet. So I've really probably blown your mind and taken things quite a bit forward. I've tried to introduce new ideas, but the whole basis of it is the dance between the capacity for complex thinking and the life conditions, and how those are joined together. And if you're going to form any teams, you've got to understand the dynamics within that team before you start. And this is where we start playing gap analysis. So with the people in the Philippines, the 30 senior directors, the C-suite, we broke out all their results, their composite results, and then did a gap analysis between the CEO, his C-suite directors, and the rest of the directors. So he could see very easily where he was out of tune with them. And it's actually given him some insights. And he's now going through subject-object training, ego training, communications, etc., because we also had another survey that went in there, custom survey, which allowed people to feed back their views. So that's where we're at. If you want to know more, I'm happy to answer all questions. There's a reading list on the end of this, and you can all have, you're welcome to a copy of it. We'll put it up on Slack, shall we, Philippine?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
On top of that, the range of instruments we've got, there's one called Leader View, which allows you for the leader to fill it in and then send it to his staff. And it's not a 360 feedback in the traditional sense, because you're getting a coping mechanism profile for the person answering the questions. So you can see why they're answering the questions in a certain way. And it gives lots of insight. And there's, I think there's 30 leadership dimensions in there based on NLP practices. Next week, we're going into the full testing stage of a Teal gap instrument aimed at companies making the journey. That is really exciting. It's taken us nearly 3 weeks to get the questions right. If you want, I can show you a little preview of it if they're interested. Hold on, share screen.
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, I've just got to find out where my share screen's gone. Where's it gone? Oh, it's just down there. Now, just that one. I think that's the one, right. Now, this is very rough at the moment. We're waiting for the designers to come back with the actual thing. But these are normal way that our results come out. One of the things we do, by the by, is you see that we've got the 5Deep New Zealand logo up there. Well, whichever consultant is running it, they have their own logo in there. So it becomes part of their toolkit. So where are we? Here we are. This is the gap model. So we're looking at the collective and the individual. And we're looking at less complexity to more complexity. I wonder if I can bring that down a bit. That's better, isn't it? There we go. Right. So around here, we're looking at the present complexity culture and the desired. So here, you're seeing the differences. Now, these are fictitious results, so for testing purposes. So this one is the success culture, the present, and desired, and so on all the way around. So you've got the cool colors on the left and the warm colors on the right, which again accords to the left-right brain. Also, you can see here, if it was real, they've got a lot of collective in the present and they desire less of it. They haven't got much individualism, but they need some more of it. I mean, remember, these are fictitious results. And we put words in like safety, power, order, success, people, and complexity, because we're talking to a orange-green audience. Okay, so this then breaks down
John,
a bit further.
Sorry, John, I'm sorry to interrupt, because we have only 5 minutes left, and I do want people to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So this is just to get you a feeling for a whole new assessment tool, geared to who? How would you describe it?
Well, I described it as the orange-green transition companies that want to make the Teal journey.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so it just gives you an idea of what we look at: mission, values, all those sort of things, people, processes, support systems. So there we are.
Yes.
That's it. Open for questions.
Thank you. It's looking great, John. There was a question in the chat. Somebody chatted something earlier. The film. Philippe, assessment of healthy or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Is that still something somebody wants to know?
Sorry, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the chat.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Right. Okay, well, this again is not given much space. People don't really like to discuss it. But it is really important to understand that there are healthy and unhealthy. You know, it goes back to Young, Light and Dark, Hofstede's Move Away, Move Towards. Every system has healthy side and unhealthy side. And what we try to do when we work into companies is find out which is the healthy and which is the unhealthy, and then address the unhealthy and say, well, this is really, in our opinion, and the way you're working, it's an unhealthy way of doing things. Sometimes they don't like that statement, other times they come on board. But it is really important to understand healthy and unhealthy. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Yes, well, I think it's important that, you know, what I notice in the Teal movement, that there is a little bit of wrong making of previous worldviews, and also not seeing that every worldview has its own value, healthy side, and its unhealthy side. And even the Teal has a very unhealthy side.
Correct.
So, yeah, that's what I like about it.
Now, see, there's another question there, blah, blah, blah. He said I was talking from another slide, which is the gap model. Again, I'll make all these available to you. That was the Bob and Jane one I was reading from.
Yeah, so for the sake of time, because people will start leaving, I know they will, I'm going to thank you for now, John. And I'm sure that we can stay on for 5 more minutes if somebody has a particular question.
Yeah.
I think it is, like I said in the beginning, very important that we know that Lalou is standing on the shoulders of people like John.
Well, not me, no. Standing on the shoulders of people like Graves.
The Graves is, you're standing on Graves' shoulder. And then everybody, well, there's a whole pyramid. And the foundation is really solid and really interesting. And I also think that the work you're doing in itself, it shows that there is so much more to quick fixes. You know, it cannot be that we just decide, this is better for the organization, so let's all move here. You know, there is a lot of nuance everywhere to be seen. And I have taken the assessment, and I've seen that I have this brain full of orangey, red, and purple parts in it, and how that shows up. And I'm very much more conscious about things I'm doing and not doing. So if you start working And John is a sort of behind the scenes, right? If I understand,
Yeah.
you work with the client,
Right.
and you can do the assessment with the client, and then John interprets everything, and you can funnel all the information you want back to the client. You don't have to share the entire report or the whole depth or the complexity of it. Maybe you just want to look into frustration levels, or so I think that's it for now. John, do you have something maybe to close off?
No, I just hope you enjoyed it and I didn't confuse too many people.
That's okay. This is just to show what is underneath. There is a lot underneath, and if you want to know more, ask John. Or
Yeah, I'm happy.
from
I'm happy to do another one. I'm happy to help anybody. So you just have to ask.
John is very, very yellow. He just wants to give away everything. I told him, make this a nice sales pitch and tell everybody to buy your assessment. And he said, no, I just want to share my knowledge. So, two nice people in the world. You're too nice, John. Thank you so much for your effort and making this presentation really worthwhile.
Okay, good.
People, if you want to reach John, go on Slack. He's on Slack, and you can talk via Slack and ask him more questions. Thank you, Fiona, for as an active participant, and thank you, Renee, for
Well, I just say, like you, I've done the assessment, and I've just had John's partner staying with me for a week and his wife. So,
sorry, say that again.
Like you, I've done the assessment.
Yes.
Last week I had John's partner, Christopher, and Sheila staying with me for a week. So that's where my questions are coming from as well.
Very good, very good. Okay, dear people, there will be more of this. I quite liked it. Did you like this webinar? Is this a good way of working?
Yeah.
Yeah, Teal for Teal goes global. Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And see you all around sometimes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.